Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Indigenous Women's in Leadership Series. We're so grateful that you're here with us today. This is the third panel of this incredible series. So many of you may have attended the Trailblazers of Conservation panel and the Grandmothers of Conservation panel. And both of those were great discussions on the power of gathering and honoring and celebrating all the women who have helped guide us in our work to protect the land and the water of Turtle Island and beyond. Now, this series here today is a collection of storytelling circles and dialogues that we're going to learn from inspiring Indigenous women of all ages who are leading conservation efforts across this country. And the panel today is called the Stewards of Conservation, and it highlights the work of Indigenous women who are on the land in their communities as guardians, steward practitioners, elders, project coordinators. Now, this is a four-part series, so there is going to be another final panel, probably sometime early next year. This panel is offered by two host partners of the Conservation Through Reconciliation Partnership, the Isaac Olam Foundation and the Indigenous Leadership Initiative. And together, we're going to explore stories of Indigenous women who are standing with strength and dedication. And it's my honor to be a part of this important panel as a moderator and a speaker. And I thank you all for joining us here today. Now, to open us up in a good way before we start our introductions and our storytelling, I have the honor to invite Elder Linda Boudreau-Semaganis to be with us here today. Elder Linda is a proud Métis grandmother, a community leader, a national senator with the National Association of Friendship Centers, and you may recognize her. She was also a panelist in the second session of the Indigenous Women's webinar series. Linda, we'd be so honored if you would open us up in this sharing circle of the virtual campfire series and bring us into this space in a good way. Thank you so much.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to start with a smudge, and what I want you to do is just close your eyes and imagine the smudge wafting over you and enveloping you in the strong cleansing odor of the sage. This is prairie sage. So I'm going to light up a little smudge here. Creator, grandmothers and grandfathers, I ask that you bless us all as we're here to do sacred work, to keep our environment safe, our culture safe, our women and children safe, and to keep all things nurtured on Mother Earth. Creator, I give thanks that you have given us a day to do this, a beautiful day with sunshine and the crispness in the air that's causing all the leaves to fall, and to show us how powerful it is that things can remain standing even though they're external leaves and are falling and hitting the ground, and they in turn nurture the ground so that it in turn can nurture the roots and plants beneath and the little creatures that crawl. I ask that you help us to appreciate what's around us and to learn to live with kindness, respect, and love for one another. And for all these things I ask, Creator, I ask in your name, because you are all powerful. Hi, hi, kinanaskum then. Hi, hi. Okay.
Hi, Sugusinla, Linda, we appreciate that gratefully for you to be able to open us up in that way and ground us with this with a smudge. Hadn't had the opportunity to smudge myself yet today, so it's nice to do that with you all virtually. Yeah, it was very grounding indeed. And I hope that you're able to join us for the rest of the panel here too, and also have be able to be ended the panel in a good way as well. Now, it is now my utmost pleasure to introduce some of our panelists here today. We have Celeste Smith from the Oneida Nation, Tara Marsden from the Gitanyow Nation, Sharon Morin from the Métis Nation, and myself, Gillian Staveley from the Kaska Dena Nation. And we're so grateful to be here with you all today from all the landscapes and places that make up our collective homelands. And we're going to start off with some introductions. We're going to go from east to west in our direction of introductions. So we'll be starting with Celeste. And after our introductions, we're going to go in reverse order with a bit of a round of storytelling followed by the Q&A. So Celeste, I'll invite you to start us off and share a bit about yourself and who you are.
Well, thank you so much, Gillian. It's pretty awesome to be here today and meet all these amazing women and to be in this virtual space, I guess you would say. And so I just wanted to give thanks for that, first of all, to be here and just to acknowledge everyone's amazing work. So I guess someone has to go first. So I guess it's me. So Sigoli, Celeste Smith Nyanyets. My name is Celeste Smith, and I'm Oneida Nation from Six Nations. For those of you who don't know where Six Nations is, it's in Southern Ontario, so-called Southern Ontario. It's near Brantford, which is not far from Toronto. So it's definitely an urbanized place. However, I grew up in urban setting because my grandmother left after residential school when she was 18 and released. So she went with a lot of other folks, and I grew up in Fort Erie, Ontario, which is a place where lots of Haudenosaunee folks are and Anishinaabe folks, and I grew up learning from the friendship centers there, which is the friendship center movement. I kind of grew up in the friendship center movement and really was lucky to be, taken in by the community and just help build kind of an amazing space. Because many of us are no longer attached. I have lots of family that live on our original lands and in the reserve. I hate the word reserve, but that live there. And yeah, it was really painful for my family. So they just never moved back. So, but good things are happening and reconnected, and we're doing some amazing farm work, starting with my cousins who are living there. And I have kind of a story that I wanted to share about. I know we have a few minutes, about 10 minutes, right? About 10 minutes to talk. Yeah, around there. Okay. And I just wanted to share a little bit about kind of how I got here. Really, I used to think that education was the new buffalo, and this is something that came out in the 90s, right? When I was growing up. That's really unfortunate because I never graduated high school. I left really early, and I had kids and a family, like a lot of us do, really early. And I wasn't really sure what I was going to do in the future. All I did know that I had been an activist, I had been a gardener, I had a fire in me from the time I was really young. My grandmother would always say, "How do you grow this stuff? How do you do this with these tomatoes? How do you get this stuff to grow?" And I would look at her and I said, "I don't know. This is just something that I've always done." And she would come over and she would just praise me so much. And we had this connection because she never went back. So she never had land to grow on. Unbeknownst to me at the time, my cousins were some of the best agriculturalists on Six Nations. And my great aunt Ione Anderson was one of the best agriculturalists, modern agriculturalists in modern time. And so while she was running around the world and teaching people about food sovereignty, I was growing my little garden with my little kids around me, not knowing what was happening. But I just, and then Idle No More came, coming up to the 10-year anniversary now of Idle No More, right? And that focused me. I think it focused a lot of us. I think a lot of us really got excited and wanted to be of service, right, to our people. And so I was listening to some of the speeches, and an elder told me, an elder said, if you're not, what are you doing if you're not working for your people? What are you doing? What is your purpose, right? What's your purpose? And I just thought, wow, I really don't think my purpose is to be an assistant manager of a Le Chateau. I probably should do something more. I don't think that's really helping my people. So 6 months later, I was back in school. I went to a bridge program. I went to Niagara College. I loved it. I did really well. I got involved with Indigenous student services. I started to work for them. Then I went to Brock University. After that, really had a fire in my belly, and it was for Indigenous human rights. And it was like, this is really, really strong in our people, right? And we all feel that. And so I felt that call. I felt the call to work for justice. And I got invited to go to Columbia University to attend human rights school. And I was in human rights school and just, going to the UN and just doing all this really cool stuff. And kind of, I wanted to be a lawyer, right? And I wanted to fight for our people. And then my great aunt passed. And it really, really hit me that I was spending all this time in school and learning and all this stuff. But now she's a seed keeper. She had all these seeds. Where were the seeds going to go? And who was going to farm the land? My cousin's older. And so if I'm not working for our people, like, what am I talking about? I'm talking about saving our rights. I'm talking about saving our cultural rights. But if I'm not actually practicing those cultural rights, what am I going to save if they disappear? Right? Here's my own family with my own seeds and my own agricultural practices. And I didn't get a chance to learn enough to even keep them going. So that was a real epiphany for me. And I quit everything, and I just went, and I moved to Manitoulin Island, and I didn't know what I was going to do here, but I knew I had to get out of the city. The city was not a place that I could do this work. And I just started to grow things. I started a seed company during COVID and just tried to get, all the knowledge that I could, right? From everywhere, traveling places, listening to people, building on what I had already learned over the past 30 years, right? In my own homestead. But then I had this pumpkin that I grew. It was white. Or it was a squash. It was a Lakota white squash. It was this amazing, beautiful ghost squash. I was so proud of it. So I brought it to one of my friends who's an elder here, Shirley Chichu, and I said, look at that squash. Here you go. I grew this. It's a super rare squash. And she's like, what do you want me to do with that? And I was like, what? I thought you would know how to do that. Not thinking she was a residential school. She went to residential school. Maybe she didn't know the old ways. So I thought, wow, here's a bunch of women who really want to learn things but don't know how, right? But it's in us, it's within us, right? It's within all of us. So why don't we get women together on the land and relearn this together, right? Why don't we make a place? So that's what I did. So we're building Gagitsigimigamik here on Manitoulin Island, which is a women's center for ecological knowledge. And we're basically going to learn together. And that's a little bit about me.
Wow, what a beautiful story, Celeste. Thank you so much for sharing that in your introduction, because I think a lot of us can probably connect to what you're saying, and just knowing that you've had this journey yourself of relearning, reconnection, and reclaiming space and place. It's so beautiful. So thank you so much for that. Now, next in our directions of introductions, I'm going to ask Sharon Morin to say a few things about yourself and who you are and where you're from, and yeah, we'll start from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Sharon Morin, Indigenous-led. It's funny that I'm the second from the East, because usually I'm one of the last in my work because there's so many people out East. So when I looked at it, I had to check it twice. I was like, oh, okay. Thank you so much, Celeste, for your knowledge and what you shared. It's fascinating, and learning for me, like traditional seed keepers, and I'm fascinated with that, and I want to learn more, and I just think it's so wonderful. So thank you so much. So I'm from the Métis Nation. I was always raised in my culture. I feel very fortunate. I almost look at it as one of those privileges that people talk about because of the way I was raised. Well, unconventional, it was very normal in our life. We were even unconventional outside of the Métis realm. I was raised, I was the first child that my mother raised from birth to adulthood, because my older siblings were scooped in the late 50s and kept until the mid 60s, just about when I was born. So that was interesting in itself. My mother was always proud of her culture. Her dad made her be proud of her culture, but she was the only one in her family that identified as being Métis. Everybody else identified as either French or non-Indigenous. My mother moved us up north in about 1969, 1970. With just me and a couple of the older siblings and a younger brother. And we moved north to where my mom became quite an activist. My mother, just so you got some context, my mother was the first Indigenous woman appointed to the Canadian Senate. Her name was Thelma Shalafu. And Thelma got there because of the work she did in community, not because of political affiliations or being a lawyer or anything like that. It was because of community work and community activism that she did. A lot of it had to do with conservation of cultural practices and women's knowledge and family traditions and everything like that. So being that kid with her, a lot of times I was taking to meetings with her, and I was made to sit with the elders while she did her business and that. And I was kind of a quiet kid, not so much anymore, but I was a quiet kid, and I was able to learn so much from sitting with those elders. She raised us as a single woman in a town where it was an oil town, it was booming. There was a lot of discrimination against Indigenous people to begin with, and then this woman comes in with orange lipstick and wearing, modern suits and wants to start a land claims division for the Métis Nation, and then eventually start a friendship center. And it was like, oh my God, we're going to like explode. But she kept at it, and it's, I think about it lots now. I'm almost 60 spins around the sun, and I think about it lots. And I think of how she groomed me. She groomed me to be who I am today. And I couldn't speak the words that I speak now without her, but not only her, many others, besides her that she introduced me to. And I'll maybe share some of those names later on. For me, I think it's important that we name those names of those women and those people that influenced us. It's how we keep their legacy alive. So whether, we were out with getting the commercial fishing license, and Uncle Leo was getting us fish out of the lake, we had a gentleman that would hunt for my mom, a traditional man. We did everything traditional. We go out, pick berries. Mrs. Gillian would come across from the back way and, show us how to cook on the fire. And we learned about the sap in the trees and all of those things that formed me into what, and who I am today. When my mom retired from the Senate, she started a place in St. Albert called the Michif Cultural Connections. We call it Michif Cultural Connections Society now. It was the Resource Institute, Michif Resource Institute. Using that word Michif because that's our language, and a lot of people don't know the name of our language. I always say Nia Michifasqueo, I'm a Michif woman. And that setting itself in that community, which is a historical Métis community in St. Albert, to where I go to work for the museum and we create land-based learning experiences on historical Métis river lots that not only Indigenous children access, everybody accesses it. Everybody is able to access it. And learn from it and learn our ways and learn that our ways were we were practicing conservation. We were stewarding the land. We were ensuring that everybody had enough. There was equity. It wasn't equality, it was equity. We were making sure that, the elders, we'd go on the buffalo hunt and the elders were looked after. And that's kind of, I think that's so marvelous that we can share that now and people are learning it. But also it's us taking that back. And I think that's a powerful thing, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Beautiful lessons, Sharon. Thank you so much for sharing in your introduction. I'm already seeing some themes presenting itself so far between all of us. And I think there's going to be some great guidance we can give people later on in the panel. So thank you again. I'll now bring it over to my nearest geographical neighbor there, Tara Marsden with the Gitanyow Nation. And Tara, I'll give you the opportunity to explain a little bit more about your upbringing and who you are and what you're doing today.
Doik sitnism amahihu simgiget sigrimhanak ganskobowalsik, Tar Marsden Naxginkw, Wilpskam lachelt winsawit, lachkaneda badegi. Wilpsbach lachip winjogai. Good morning, chiefs, matriarchs. It's an honor to be here. My name's Tar Marsden. My Gitsan name is Naxginkw, and I am in New Hazelton, which is in Wilpsbach territory of the Gitsan. And for those of our Eastern friends and relatives, this is in the northwest part, so not on the coast, but about 3 hours from the northwest coast, place of Prince Rupert and Kitimat and those types of communities. I really thank my panelists, Celeste and Sharon. I don't like talking about myself. I'm like a technician. I'm not a leader. I've never wanted to be in elected or hereditary leadership. And so I don't feel comfortable talking about myself, but I'm so glad you went first, because now I can be like, okay, I can connect, and it's okay. It's okay to share a little bit about myself. I'm usually the one with the PowerPoints and all the data and the stats. And so yeah, very interesting and wonderful stories to hear this morning. So the place that I'm from, Gitanyow, one thing I really am proud of, and as I'm listening to your stories, Gitanyow had this name, this sort of like alternate name as the Ocala Prison Reserve, and our chiefs in the early 1900s were defending our territory from surveyors, from people who wanted to come in and settle, and they were evicting surveyors. They were evicting the commissioners who were coming in trying to set up reserves, and they were saying, this is our territory. We do not want reserves. We want our entire territory protected. And in those actions, there was a group of them that ended up being arrested and put in the Ocala prison in the Lower Mainland. And it's because of them that today we have a very small settlement of non-Indigenous people in our territory. We have a territory that's about 6,200 square kilometers, and we have a small, we call it the Caucasian Reserve, basically. So if you're ever driving up towards Gillian's country, up Highway 37, you'll go through our territory up towards the Yukon. And it's that type of fierceness and fearlessness that I try and carry forward today in the work that we're doing to protect our lands and waters. I guess in terms of my formative years and listening to the stories about how I became involved, I was going to university and sort of lost, I would say, just sort of trying things out. And I did a summer gig with rediscovery camps. So many of our communities have those or had them in the past. And those were those youth camps that took people out on the land and connected to culture and to land. And I was in some of the prairie territories in North Saskatchewan, near Lac Orange, and just beautiful, beautiful country. And we would take families out. Instead of just the youth, it would be like a family where they were potentially losing their children to care. And so they'd go out and we'd go on 2-week canoe trips. I also went to the rediscovery camps in BC on the West Coast and just had this amazing experience. And I was so naive and young at the time. I just was like, why is this the situation? Why are our people struggling with addiction? Why, it wasn't just the community I was from. I was exposed to all these other communities. And I felt really this strong sense of injustice for the first time. And so, just like Celeste, it's like, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to be a lawyer? What, how am I going to be of service to this injustice that we're all experiencing? And so I ended up going with political science. I loved governance. I love learning about different types of government, and our system is hereditary. And so we've maintained that despite colonization and the Indian Act. And so my focus on governance now is really around land use planning, policy development for our people, Indigenous protected areas, and any type of modern tool where we can apply our teachings, our Indigenous laws, but in a modern way that people can then understand and follow. The whole point is that they follow our laws. If they can't understand them, if they can't apply them to different activities, then we can't expect that they'll be able to follow them. So yeah, just being a mother of 2 kids, a single mom for the past 8 years, raising 2 kids of my own, being in circles with women is very empowering for me. And I just wanted to really thank and honor the hosts and the Elder Linda for opening us, and just really look forward to our dialogue today.
Thank you, Tara. I completely agree. There's so much teachings and learnings that come from these circles that are such safe spaces. And thank you for sharing a bit about your history. I've come to just briefly in the past 20 minutes or so, learn so much from the 3 of you. So thank you so much for that. And I want to be able to return that gift of storytelling as well, and share a little bit about myself. And I'm pretending we're sitting around a campfire, because that's just what this is all about, right? So, Sezi Mizdi Guye, Kaska Dena Lasta, Tiona Dena Lasta, Denik Ayan Nizde, Didini Ganima. So my given name to me in our language means owl, and I'm from the Kaska Nation, Wolf Clan, and I live within my traditional territory and work here as well. We call it Denikaya. It means the people's country, and I'm one of many women who are out there taking care of the land. So I think, like with so many of us, to understand who we are is to understand the environment we grew up in and we live within. And we've already been sharing a bit of storytelling around that, about how we are the way that we are. And, I in reflecting on that, I have come from a beautiful mix of cultures and traditions. My father was a 7/8 generation Newfoundlander from Corner Brook, and I'm pretty sure he spent more time on the water than the land growing up. And I was obviously influenced by that. And then my mother, who's Kaska Dena from northern BC and southeast Yukon, she came from a long line of Kaska women who have a center of place and understanding and well-being in the lands that we call home. And we've always advocated for our people and for our land. So I was, again, influenced by that. And growing up, both my parents studied caribou. So I got to spend a lot of time on the land with them, probably more than kids my age did. And maybe that's because I was an only child. But again, it influenced me spending that much time out on the land. And I'm lucky to say that now as a mother myself, I feel so blessed that I get to know these places intimately, and I get to show my kids these places, and they can continually grow up to experience them. And a lot of those places that we get to spend time in is because of the work that I do. And I feel like so many of us, to define our work, the first and foremost thing we say is that we're land stewards. You know, we're people that we advocate for our homeland, wherever that may be. Even if we don't live within those lands, we advocate for them. And more recently, I'm learning to become a bit more of an educator and a storyteller, and really work with others on the importance of having connection to land, or in some cases, reconnecting to your ancestral lands. And I do that in my, I guess, formal title as a Director of Culture and Land Stewardship with the Dena Institute, which is a Kaska-run non-for-profit and charitable organization. And at DKI, we basically focus on the initiatives that the communities want us to pursue. And a lot of that connects with cultural heritage work, language revitalization, but most importantly, you know, these stewardship initiatives that we're all doing. And one of the biggest things that we're working on right now is an Indigenous protected and conserved area proposal known as Denakekusan, and it's located in northern BC. I think it's maybe one of the bigger IPCA proposals in Canada. I'm not sure where things stand with that now, but we're really proud of that work, and we're really proud of the work that we're doing within our Guardian programs. And I'm always so happy to reflect on just how many women in our communities are part of that work. It's always so inspiring to me, and I know we're going to be getting into that a little later on in the panel discussion, but it's just something I recognize every day, the amount of women in this work, and I think that should be acknowledged in some way. But more recently as well, I'm diving into the teaching world. I'm an instructor at UConn University, and have had the wonderful opportunity to over the past few years really engage with students to find a way to like sit with the understanding that Indigenous way of knowing have a place in our world today. And we can, as Indigenous people, as non-Indigenous people in this country, bring it into our everyday lives. And I think a lot of what we're trying to talk about today around this panel of stewardship, of conservation, is teaching others and learning from each other. And I thought I'd start off a little bit of that storytelling session for us before I bring it back out to my neighbors and my panelists here, is just to think a little bit more about what stewardship means to us as Indigenous women who are all working within our communities, and how it has guided us in our work and our personal lives, because a lot of the time they are the same. Looking at you all, I can tell that we all feel that connection to our nations and our communities, and therefore our work doesn't feel like work because it is who we are. But we come from matrilineal societies, and those are communities who really have valued women as life givers and healers and wayfinders and leaders and survivors. And I feel that our communities, you know, many of us have had women chiefs in our communities. And in my community, the women chiefs were always said to have spoken from the heart. And I noticed in my life and the work that I've done, you know, whether it's intuitive or not, we are so deeply connected to our heart's longing. And my heart growing up was really connected to the questions that were being raised in our community about this balance between traditional values, such as seeing the land as this source of identity and history of knowledge, seeing the land like a relative, and also this counteracting narrative within our societies that the land is actually a commodity and it's a resource for us to control. And so being raised with those mutual understandings, like so many of us, it can be challenging to navigate. But luckily I was raised by very strong matriarchs in my community. A lot of the women in my family are some of the knowledge keepers, and they raised me to have a very strong identity of who I was. You know, my mom, my aunties, my cousins, they all wanted me to know that I had an invested interest almost in safeguarding that definition of self, of like what it means to be a Kaska woman. So they were educating me on who I was and just the value of the land and the ethical relationships that we can have within each other and those around us. And it's just, those lessons are just obviously so deeply rooted in our collective ways of knowing, doing, and being. And I think often of all the women in our history throughout time, mothers, grandmothers, aunties, sisters, all they have taught their children or children in their lives how to become knowledge holders and maybe even storytellers that would pass on these traditions and these worldviews. And I think of the number of women who are part of that beautiful web of being and who have lived in the places that they call home, knowing them intimately, adapting to them, learning from them. And it's really that sacred connection that I feel when I'm doing the work that I'm doing of trying to protect something, because it's not just protecting land, it's protecting something about ourselves. And so I think that's why naturally Indigenous women are so active in these causes, because we all collectively feel that ethical duty and responsibility is almost like these holders of kinship. And we are naturally educators because of that. You know, we're good mothers, we're good land stewards. We want to protect the land. We want to protect the way of life of our communities. And it's because we've been raised to look at the land as if our children's material and spiritual lives depended on it. And that multi-generational view of land stewardship is what I'm constantly thinking about. You know, that my great-great-great-grandchildren need to be encountering a healthy place to live and call home. And therefore, it's this almost like divine human nature that we need to take care of our future families. So I guess long and short, I just feel that there's this need to have these positive, loving relationships with the land. And I just know that so many of us are working through the very real acts of colonization that still exist in our world today. And we know that if we to get out of this hurt and to grow into these strong nations that exist within Canada, it's all about relating and experiencing the land, and that the survival of our communities depends on it in a lot of ways, and the health and well-being of future women in our communities depends on it in a lot of ways. We want to make sure that we have these safe, stable relationships. And I think a lot of the work that we do collectively is about dismantling those processes of colonization that have made us feel unsafe in our own lands. And my God, when women start praying and start advocating for what they believe in, there is transformational change. And I've seen it. I know it's happening right now because women are those natural leaders in conservation and stewardship. And there's incredible male leaders as well in our communities doing this important work. And so many of them are actually the ones that are the most supportive, I feel, that and celebrate and acknowledge the trailblazing efforts of women in our communities. So I just kind of want to leave it at there for now and pass it back to Tara and ask you to share a bit more in your storytelling. And if you want to have a guiding idea to think about of just around this idea of stewardship and what it means to you as an Indigenous woman and how it guides you in your work and personal life, that would be wonderful. But anything that you feel comfortable sharing around this idea, I think would be lovely. Sugasinla.
Gillian. Yeah, for me, it's stewardship is that place of humility that, you know, we're not managing the land. We're not, like you said, we're not using it. We have to, we rely on it. We need it, but we're not as smart as we think we are as a collective society and species, I think. And so it's a place of humility where you are learning constantly from the land and learning how to be a better human, I think. For the work that I do kind of on a daily basis, being guided by our teaching, especially the Gitsan teaching of Gwelchianst, and that's the right and responsibility we have to pass on the territory in the same state or better to the next generation. Many of our people say that if we receive a full basket, we have to ensure that we're passing on a full basket to the next generation. And when I think about that, it's like the responsibility is quite overwhelming. We're not doing it alone, of course, but we do have a very significant responsibility because we are in the face of colonization and climate change now. It's getting a lot harder. So with the work around, you know, land use planning and trying to, I think, meet government halfway constantly, it's like, let's always compromise, let's bring our position and their position, and let's find that middle ground. It's this really sort of exhausting and draining process. And what I see now more is that young people are kind of encouraging our generation to, you know, like stop going to government so much and asking for permission and stop compromising so much. And they are growing up in a time that is different than ours. They have more fear and anxiety around climate change and around loss of, you know, culture and species and diversity, biodiversity. But they also have a freedom, you know, that we didn't. Well, depending on your age, I'm not going to assume all of our ages, but I didn't feel as free to speak as the way young people do today. So it's like that really inspiring for me to see these people just so bold and so like fearless in terms of giving us the guidance that we need to do the work. And so yeah, for example, with our land use plan, it was government to government. It is a compromise. There's always more you can do. And so we had been trying to expand a conservancy for a long time, about 6 years, because we knew that the salmon were spawning in more abundance in one area that wasn't protected, and they were suffering in the area that was protected in the conservancy. Conservancy is a part of our government to government land use plan. And so the WILP, whose territory that was in, just said, like, let's do this on our own. Why are we waiting for government and always begging for them to give us attention and give us, you know, the permission to protect an area? And we were thankful and really grateful that a couple other nations had already done something that we were aware of. And so there's the tribal parks in BC. There's the Dasyko for Chilcotin, and then the Tloquet tribal parks have been around for a long time. And they just did it, you know, they established their declaration, they have their ceremony, and then they do their outreach and their communications based on that. So really inspired by that model. And so last year we established that protected area in our own IOC and our own laws. And it protects over 50,000 hectares of critical spawning habitat for Nass River sockeye. And it's one of the things that I'm just there's a lot of work that I have done that I'm really happy with. I'm really, I take pride in, but this for me is just because we did it so much with so much intention around following cultural protocol. And so at the event, we had it, instead of having it in a boardroom or in the community hall, even, we had it on the territory, right at the fishing site. We had it in the rain. It rained on us for half the day, and then it was nice and cleared up. People got muddy and we had, you know, barbecued fish, and then people had their speeches witnessing, affirming, you know, our clans, our Nadil, our opposite clan, affirming, yes, this is your business. We've witnessed it. We're affirming what you've done here. All of our neighboring nations coming together, and government was invited because that's our protocol, is we want them to witness as well. Government was told to stay away because they know what witnessing means for our people. But, you know, one of the speakers from Wet'suwet'en, he said, you know, it's good they stayed away. Like, we don't need them here. We can do this on our own. And it feels right. It feels like the right thing to do. And it just, that type of message from our neighbors, when we're connected by intermarriage or connected through watersheds or all those kin-based connections, it still gives me chills to this day to think of the words that were spoken. And so that for me is just like, okay, this is how we can do things from now on. We don't have to always be stuck in boardrooms with government hammering things out. Like, yes, that's important. You need that. But if that's all you're doing, your soul's going to get like destroyed eventually. So do the things in your own laws, do it on the land, and yeah, just don't be afraid, because you've got a huge network of people that will support you when you do it.
Absolutely, Tara. Great advice to all the communities that are attending this session today. And I know that you've helped us as well. And it's just so important to know that we have that support amongst all Indigenous communities across this country. There's more that connects us than divides us, and we need to support each other in that work. And I think in a lot of ways, that's one of the main premises behind this speakers series, to know that we're all in this good fight together. So thank you for that. Such good teachings. I'll bring it now over to Sharon to see if there's some further stories that you'd like to share around this theme of stewardship and women in that work.
Well, as I'm sitting here and listening to these marvelous information that we're hearing, and we have this beautiful elder with us, I'm taken back to the words that I've learned from Linda Boudreau, and we hold it very near and dear to our heart. But she says, when women gather, healing begins. And I think that's so true on every level, when it comes to climate, when it comes to family, when it comes to MMIWG, all of it. Our women are powerful. We are the keepers of our traditions, the knowledge. We are the ones that share the culture. We are the ones that hold that near and dear to our heart. We walk with it. And all of those ancestors walk behind us and support us in that walk that we're doing now. So I think that, you know, just being raised by the woman that I was raised by, and the amount of women that she worked with that were, you know, all leaders in their own rights, were in their own way making these, what I would call ripples, or they were planting their seeds. And those seeds are now growing into trees and flowers that are in the likes of me and others that were around at that time. As I was learning all of that stuff and being exposed to it, I was also taught about how we're in relationship with everything. In Cree teachings, we have this word called Wakotwin, and it's like all my relations. We're related to the winged ones. We're related to the insects. We're related to the four-legged. We're related to the two-legged. We're related to the fins, the plants, everything. We're all related, and we all have responsibility for them, us even more, because we're the humans, we're the two-leggeds. And so that idea of Wakotwin is something that I keep near and dear to me in the work that I'm doing now with women of the Métis Nation. But it was also something that I kept near and dear to me in the 20 years that I did in educational programming with the students and the adults. Living where I grew up in northern Alberta in a town called Slave Lake. It's the biggest lake in Alberta, Lesser Slave Lake. There is a Greater Slave Lake, but it's not all in Alberta. It's partially in the territories. So Lesser Slave Lake is the largest one. We use that lake for everything, recreation, food, all of that stuff. But one thing I remember being really young, I was probably around 9, and we moved into a newer home in this newer division, and we had 2 bathrooms, and you know, it was a nice house. And I remember brushing my teeth one morning, and I turned the water on as I'm brushing my teeth, and I'm brushing away, and my mom came in to the bathroom, and she said, "You need to turn the water off. You don't need to have it running while you're brushing your teeth." And I was like, "Why?" And she says, "Because all those little fish in Slave Lake that we like to have for dinner need to have water. And so we can't be wasting the water like that." We'd go for drives. You know, we did a lot of traveling back from Slave Lake to Edmonton and back, and we were never allowed to throw litter out. My mom didn't allow litter to be thrown out of the car at all. Lots of people did that at that time. You know, it was the 70s. They just chucked it out the window. She would never let us do that, right? Only if we were having like an apple or an orange or something, then we could throw it out, because she would say the birds or the bunnies will get it or something. So those were kind of, and I never realized it, at that time. You don't think about it. I mean, we were living in a big oil boom town, things were happening. A lot of our people worked the oil fields, to support their families. A lot of people suffered from making all that money. The land suffered. But my mom always kept that in our brain that, we didn't mess with the land. She was one of us. She was our mother. And I just think that Wahkohtowin is so important when we're doing this kind of work. So that's what I'll share for now. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sharon. Yeah, it just feels to me, based on what you said in the elders' teachings from Linda and others, that, this notion around when women gather, the healing begins. And I think that can be said for each generation. Each generation is making this difference. We've seen that in the lessons learned from the trailblazers and the lessons learned from our grandmothers about setting this direction and planting the seed for what we're working on today. And so many of us as practitioners within our communities doing the work today, we feel that sentiment, and we know that we've been guided in a certain way. So one of the questions I want to ask you now that we're heading into more of this roundtable discussion, that will be both questions from the audience. So audience, please send your questions to us. But I do have some ideas for some questions in the interim. But it's just to ask each of you, as you said, Sharon, naming the names. Is there someone, or not necessarily a one woman, but is there people in your community, in your family, in your nation that have really inspired you to do the work that you do? And just, I won't put anyone on the spot. I'll just offer you to come forward and share if there's someone in your mind that you can think of that has really guided you in the work that you're doing today, or a group of people. Kula.
So besides that wonderful Linda Boudreau, there was a very strong group of women within Slave Lake that my mom worked with. Madge McCree, who became a very well-known elder. I called her Auntie Bunny. Teresa Fritz, who was, her dad was the postman out of Wabasca and did it by sled. Amanda Bover and her mother, Sophie, Grandma Sophie, who spoke a really old Michif, that was spoken around there. And Eleanor Sowen, Edith Sinclair, Mabel and Myrtle McCree, or Coutre. I mean, I could go on and on. For me, though, with the work that I do now, one of the women that has influenced me the most is a non-Indigenous woman, and her name is Sherry Strachan. And I worked with Sherry for many years at the museum. And Sherry was and is still, she's a good friend of mine. She had so much faith in me and gave me so much space to do and create what I wanted to do without really any boundaries around, except that I had to have it all done in an hour and a half because that's how long the program was. She allowed me to kind of blossom into, what I do now. So I really have a lot of respect, and thanks for Sherry for having that for me. And then all of those ladies behind me that just push me every day. I can feel them pushing me every day, and I love it.
Tara or Celeste, is someone in your mind as well that you can speak to that? Yeah, that sentiment.
I think we're both waiting for each other to go. We're so polite, aren't we? No, you. Yeah, absolutely. My family, the women in my family have always been farmers, all the way back up. And yeah, specifically my cousins and I know that, you know, my grandmother had a connection as well. In fact, she was asked to be to learn the medicines and that, but she was too scared. So that's kind of why I do some of the things that I do, right? Because she couldn't. So I take that responsibility really seriously. So yeah.
I think for me, I was always inspired by the lack of women in some of the spaces, and so that was a big motivating factor. Seeing a lot of male dominated spaces where big decisions were being made, whether it was litigation or, you know, all those things about defending the land, and women always being in a supporting role. And I looked up to everybody. I looked up to men and women equally. I've been mentored by men throughout most of my career. But for, I guess if one person stands out, it's Ardith Wilson, and she's a Sigidimhanak matriarch for the Gitxsan. And I remember during the Delgamuuk Gisteway court case that made its way through the BC Supreme Court and then the Supreme Court of Canada, and really set precedent around Aboriginal title. And Ardith was one of the staff supports, researchers, you know, just go-getters. And I remember seeing a video of her sort of when I was in my university years, and she was the most intelligent person I had ever. I just was blown away by her fearlessness and her intelligence, and she really inspired me, and I still keep in touch with her today. We live in the same community area, and she's just one of the people I don't feel is celebrated enough among the Gitxsan people, and so I want to give her a special shout out. And yeah, just always inspiring in terms of the work that we've been doing together.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Tara. Now, I deeply want to apologize to you, Celeste. I forgot you in my flow here of storytelling, and in Kaska, we actually don't have a word for sorry. But I am sorry for that. And I would love to give you the opportunity actually to share a bit more in that storytelling flow, and maybe at the same time, work in this question that we've got that's actually directed to you. And so I'll read it out to you, and maybe you can think about it while you're giving your doing some storytelling. But what it says is, many thanks to all of you for creating such a beautiful space today. A question for Celeste. Your bio makes specific mention of women and gender diverse people at the center of your work. Can you speak to the importance of gender diversity and land matriation from your perspective? So I'll leave it to you. Thanks.
Well, in the storytelling, I just wanted to kind of, yeah, I'll definitely address that, because it's what I wanted to speak on was responsibility, and our responsibility as women, and women identifying folks as well, right? It's not up to me to identify that, right? That's up to you to do that. And that's the way I've always seen that in our culture is yes, we have gender roles, but the difference is we don't tell you what gender role that is going to be, right? So that's when I was struggling with this as well. So when we talk about these types of things, it's like, okay, we have women and we have men, but that's the difference. We're not going to tell you where you belong, right? And there is third, fourth, fifth genders in a lot of our, you know, in a lot of our cultures as well. So and that's what I always say. It's like, these are women's teachings. If you identify as women, then these are your teachings. And it's just as simple as that, right? And so that's why on our farm, it's you know, people come as but even it's never in our ways, nothing is ever black and white too. That's really important to know, right? It's actually all gray. There is, you know, so black and white, this and that, categories, all of those things. When I teach Indigenous science, I try to get it into folks' head. That's in a Western way. Categories are Western, right? So to even take the categories away, right? Take that all away, wipe it away. Don't even look at it that way. You are who you are, and that's the way it is. And if we take that, stop looking at because we've all been colonized, right? So if we try to look at it within our ways, right, and how we see it, right, and take away those Western ways. So that's kind of how I see things and how I've been taught. And I'm sure, these women here would say similar things, right? So I don't speak for anyone. I just speak for me, of course, and what I've been taught. But responsibility, no matter no matter what your gender is, it doesn't matter. We have responsibility, right? Women's responsibility always in my culture is the seeds. That's our responsibility. The land is our responsibility. We held the land. We still hold the land. We still hold the seeds. Are we doing those responsibilities though? That's what we need to think, right? So are we holding those seeds? Are we, doing those things, right? Because in my teachings in our creation story, we have the three sisters, right? Very famous when you talk about three sisters. So in my language, they're called the life sustainers, right? So that word refers to also, the plants were coming out of, in our creation story, Sky Woman comes down with all the plants she needs held in her hands, right? And then, or with the herbs, she comes with the shrubbery, and she comes with our medicine plants. And then when she falls down, right, and further on in the story, we don't have time, but anyways, so the three sisters grow from her body, right? So this is like a reflection of us as women, right? Because things grow from, all life comes from our body, right? So then we have that responsibility to make sure that keeps happening, right? With literal things like the seeds, like the land, all of this stuff. So, and it's up to us. It's not up to our nations. It's not up to our governments. It's not up to our band councils, right? I run a grassroots organization, and it's women run. Has nothing to do with band council, has nothing to do with any of that. Super hard to get funding because all the funding goes into the colonial structures that are built, right? But that's okay. We'll keep going because it's, like I said, our responsibility, right? So that's how I'd say about that. So yeah. Oh, there's many sisters, 4 sisters. Yeah, 4 sisters, a sunflower. I mean, there's like 14 sisters, 26 sisters.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing part of that story, Celeste. And I think many of us have probably have learned a lot of teachings for that and found similarities into our community's understanding of it. And it just made me think of my own, I had an uncle who always talked about seeds too, that people were just like the trees, and that, we're born and raised in this country. And when we're old, we go back to the ground like a seed. So therefore we are the seeds of our people. And that's really the way of this country. It's run by the seeds. And it's such a pivotal understanding of our identity about what it's good for the land is good for the people, because we are one and the same. And it's just, that really echoed sentiment to me for you to share that, and just how it's inclusive of everyone. It doesn't matter who you are and how you identify, but you can be part of the land. And that's a personal journey that so many of us take in our lives. And that's kind of where I wanted to head to next was, is there a story, and you've shared some of these already, but is there another aspect of your journey that was so critical to the development of where you are now? And you have shared aspects of that. Maybe to even further it a little bit, I would say, when you're doing the work that you're doing, what are the things that you're focusing on to uplift other women and other people who are doing the same work? How do you support each other? What is it that's important to you in supporting each other? And what aspects of that are you focusing on? Sorry, it's a big question, but if there's something that connects to you in that, please feel free to share. And I won't throw it at anyone, just open it up for us to have a discussion around. Kola.
Oh, okay, I'll go. I counted to 6. I said 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'll go. Uplifting. You know, I'm a firm believer in youth. I believe that the youth, I call them our agents of change. I have so much faith in them. And there's a lot of great young people coming up. There's a lot of times when I'm out doing, you know, what I do, and that I will just turn it over to young people. I'm kind of the moderator and I let them do the teachings. A lot of them have learned from me. I think that's a way to empower our kids, is to give them their voice and their identity. Who are you? You know, where do you come from? Who are your relations? You know, where, you know, like, where do you feel grounded? Those are the kinds of things that I think are so important for when we're out there doing the work that we do, and our kids need to know that. My mom used to say that our kids did not need sports figures to be our heroes. They needed people from the communities, like the elder that Tara was mentioning, and that those are the kind of heroes that our children need to look up to learn from, and to become, you know, as the Michif refer to ourselves, O Tapimsawak, we own ourselves, we know who we are, right? The O Tapimsawak. And I think that's probably one of the most important things that I've been able to do in my platform that I've had over, you know, it's 20 years now, is giving that, like, teaching the youth, sharing what I know, and then watching them go out and do what they do. I've done that with my son Josh. He's doing great things, Joshua is, and it's because of, you know, how he's tagged along and learned and everything. So I think the youth are very, very important. And I think it's us as the older ones, and, you know, I'm not old, but I'm older, that we honor those kids, because there was a lot of times when I was young and we'd go to talk and we were told to be quiet, you know, like, you know, you're just a kid, you know, like, what do you know? And I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that at all. I think our kids know a lot more than we know. They look at it in a different way, and it's their future that we're dealing with. So we should be making sure that those kids, or those youth, sorry, I use the word kids, but those youth are there alongside us learning, and we are creating space for them to be having their voices and using them to their good. So, yeah.
I could go in next. Thanks, Sharon. Yeah, I thought about this. This was one of the questions that you shared with us. Just, it was like, oh, okay, how do I do that? Am I doing that? I hope I am. How do I uplift other women in the work? And when I thought about it, I thought, well, I think what I'm trying to do is really just have this sort of unspoken, implied, unconditional support. So society, I think, kind of pits women against each other. We're in competition with each other. We don't stick together as well, maybe, as men do in certain, you know, the old boys club kind of mentality way of being. And so I think that I just, even if I don't agree, like, fundamentally with another woman, I'm just going to hold my tongue. I'm just going to say, you know what, like, I see that this, you know, that I know that you've probably been through something really difficult to get where you're at, if we're in similar types of work, and that, you know, I don't need to voice any opposition to you. I can just keep that to myself, even if it's something that's really quite important. And so that's sort of a practice I've been doing. And then I think with mentorship, it's a little different as well. You know, it's a little more subtle with women, I think, mentoring between generations. But I know that, you know, competition is something that is negative, but it's also something that's positive. You know, in our communities, it was just made me think when Sharon was talking about sports figures, sports is like a really big deal in our communities, you know, whether it's basketball or soccer, hockey. And so we have this tradition of, you know, tribal competition between nations and communities. And it's a really good vehicle for healthy competition. And so I always try and apply the teachings of sports in our work as well. As like, okay, well, you're protecting this much, well, we're protecting that much. And, you know, like, let's do it for the betterment of everybody, in a nice, healthy, competitive way, I guess. So yeah, I think of unconditional support, mentoring in a different, more subtle way, and then healthy competition. There's nothing wrong with that, I think.
Alrighty, I guess I'll go. Right, nothing wrong with some competition. No, our people are so competitive. It's great. And we often used to, like, my people used to play lacrosse games, right, instead of war. So I mean, talk about competition, right? That's a pretty important game. And yeah, it's really great to have. But based on our teachings, it's not a critical thing, competition, right? It's a good thing, because we are meant to uplift each other, right? That's part of our teachings, is to be there, right? So for me, I do a lot of international work with the UN, with the La Via Campesina, which is a farmers, peasants global organization. So I'll be traveling to Egypt for COP27 in 2 weeks. Do that. Yep. Just talking about like Indigenous. Yeah. And I've been like, I'm the first Indigenous woman to represent like farmers from Canada, which is insane to me. Like, it's insane. We need more of us out there, right? We need more Indigenous farmers, women farmers anyways, right? Just because there's so few of us. And we are the ones that are the farmers, right? The seed keepers, the landholders. So that's really what I do. The entire reason really what I do is about women's empowerment through agriculture, and agriculture isn't just Western forms of agriculture, medicine work, hunting, fishing, all those things that many people think as men's work, right? It's not just men's work, right? Like, we are involved in all of it, right? Creating, producing food, right? All of that stuff, and I really think like,
Oh, no, we may have lost Celeste there. We'll see if she can connect back in. Oh,
no,
there you are.
am I back in? Oh yeah, internet connection, and yeah. Manitoba Island, yeah. rural internet, even though I'm on Skynet, so come on, whatever. Anyways, so yeah, so that connection, like giving the connection of the seeds and the land back to women, that hole that's kind of in us where we don't have that, I think that's part of the key to healing. And so like creating just that opportunity for us to do that on the land, I think is kind of what I'm doing too.
Beautiful, beautiful sentiment for sure. Thanks so much, Celeste. Yeah, it's a great question, I think, to ask ourselves, of like this way of uplifting each other. And I agree with all of you that I think key to that is this abundance mindset that we have to frame ourselves in. And for a lot of us, we're relearning that because the Western ways of knowing are not that way. And I had a Maori sister who I've come to know recently. She told me that it's like a rising tide floats all boats. So if you succeed, I succeed. And if we're all working towards a mutual goal, we're all going to help each other in some way. And yes, competition and pushing each other can be part of that approach, but just that understanding that we're holding some space for us to succeed is huge. And that's I think I agree with you, Tara. That's something that we're seeing more and more as time goes on. And maybe some of us didn't have that growing up, but there is a shift occurring here in our society. And I agree also with you too, Sharon, that the youth are going to be a huge part of that as that agent for change. And I believe the fourth panel within this series is focused on them. So it's a beautiful life cycle, I think, of this collective visioning that we have. And I think it really flows well into this next question that's come within the Q&A from the folks that are with us here today. And it's a good one. It's a realistic one about what advice that we have for off-reserve women, or for those of us who don't have reserves in our communities, like just outside of your traditional territory or ancestral lands. How do you what advice do you have to give to those people who still want to participate in stewardship of their traditional territories, in addition to where they are living, that real geographical issue that might come into play? That's a great question. I'll open it up to us to discuss if you have any thoughts or ideas around that.
Yeah, I can start. I moved home about 13 years ago, and I lived in an urban center where I went to university, and I was welcomed into the Carrier Second Nations, and I worked with them. And so I felt like that was another home that I had. Like, I was really fortunate to have been welcomed there. And so it kept me connected to a broader, like, Indigenous identity and connected to their territories in new ways. But when I moved home, I just, I felt so relieved, like I had come home, but I'd also, you know, it's awkward at first. You have this idea, like, if you moved away, you have this idea of the past in your head, and then people who've lived there for the past, whatever, 20, 30 years that you've been away, they're living life maybe differently. And so you're always sort of, you know, managing your own expectations, I think, is the biggest thing. The people that stay in their territories, I totally hold my hands up to, because they're the ones that are keeping our culture alive. So if you have someplace to go home to, and they're still speaking the language, they're still doing activities on the territory, like, you owe them you know, it's like a debt of gratitude, really. And so giving back, being humble, but not being afraid to be awkward, and to be open to learn, and maybe to be, I don't know what your cultures are like, but we have some chastising that goes on, you know, for people who aren't, you know, behaving properly. And so being open to that, and just being accepting that you're maybe learning again or relearning, but that you probably have something of value to give. Like, whatever it is, your skill set, your knowledge base, it's probably unique, and don't underestimate what you have to contribute back to stewarding your territories.
I'll go next. That's exactly what I'm doing. I grew up on my territory, but because, you know, our territory is urban, right? It's Toronto, it's Hamilton. I mean, what are you going to do in these places, right? So basically just, you know, found a spot that was, you know, reasonably near, and just started, right? And that's exactly what we have to do when I was talking about responsibility. Just take that responsibility, just go for it. Just go for it, right? And don't let anything stop you. I mean, the reality is 75% of us do not live on reserve, right? So where are we, right? We're not on our reserves. So we have to be more, and if we all went back to reserve, could you imagine what would happen? That's insane. It's just not, it's not feasible, right? So we're talking about lands that are all over, right? And so when we talk about stewardship, you know, the land that you are on, right? And like, I'm on Anishinaabe territory, you know, 120 people were here, but I give respect to the host of that land, right? And it's odd now, not like growing up on my own territory. We're just beside my territory, but you have to be respectful, obviously, right? And so, you know, I've talked with people here, made relationships and these types of things, like, so that's kind of, you know, what you do. And if you're doing stewardship and these types of things, I mean, this is something maybe that you could, you know, I've got relationships with different First Nations and things like this. So, you know, they've got their own stuff going on, but no one's going to say, you know, you can't do some land stewardship in this area, right? Everyone, you know, it's a good thing to do no matter where you are. But obviously, yeah, land and territory are things you need to think of, but we also need to be pragmatic about it too, right? We're not all on our territories.
Yeah, you're talking to a Métis woman here that we did not sign treaties, so we don't have land like that. Alberta Métis are the only land-based Métis. There are land bases. There are what called Métis settlements within Alberta, where you see traditional life happening. A lot of them are really close to First Nations, so you see a lot of intermixing, you know. growing up north, there was a lot of that too. It wasn't really like, that's our land. We all kind of shared it together. It's different, I think, in the center and southern part of our province in that sense. But we are dealing with generations of urban people, people that have lived generations in an urban center. So I would, for us, we did have people that I still have people that are attached to the north that come, and, I just got some canned moose meat the other day from one of our elders. She brought me some, things like that. And not everybody has that either. So I find the idea of, like Celeste said, you find a spot. I love the idea of what they call guerrilla gardening, where you just go find a random spot and you just plant a garden. You see that downtown Edmonton, and a lot of homeless people access that food, right? The idea of community gardening. I see a lot of schools taking on the idea of planting traditional plants and teaching children about the plants and how to care for them, and bringing in elders to teach them about the uses of the plants. Is happening lots within Alberta. But my kids were raised urban. I have urban kids. I have my kids didn't go hunt. They didn't go fish. Well, they went fishing, but they didn't go hunting. Trying to attach them to the land was always a struggle, but we always made it happen. I used to host a tent at the International Children's Festival, and the kids come sit in my tent, and all the kids would want to pick the grass while they're sitting there. So I did my whole thing while they were in my tents, and I did this for years. We don't pull the hair out of Mother Earth. We don't want her to have a bald spot. So we're going to leave the grass there, and we respect that grass that's on the earth. And just putting it that plain and simple was easy enough for them to understand a little bit of conservation in that sense. So, we do what we can within the urban centers.
A great reminder. Absolutely. Yeah, I just love all of our stories within this question, because I think it's quite an important one. And for myself, I didn't grow up within my traditional territory. I grew up within the Kwanlin-Dun and Tonquichan Council community in Whitehorse, Yukon, and had many opportunities in my life to visit my community. Most of my family still lived there, so it wasn't like I was separated from it. But there is a difference between living and working in your community and visiting and taking part in those discussions. And like Tara said, we really do have to hold up our hands to the people who have made it their life's journey to do everything that they can do for their community, because there is sacrifice in that. There is challenges in that, but there's incredible opportunities and pros within it as well. And I think it's just important for us to navigate that in the way that we need to, based on our own health and well-being. You can visit your nation and take that pilgrimage there, do it. Get to know your people, take part in the discussion. Obviously, technology has allowed this a lot more than it did before, which is wonderful, because is that pragmatic approach that you're talking about, Celeste. We necessarily all can't live within our traditional communities, but we can be a part of them. And I made that move just 3 years ago. COVID was a focusing agent for me and my family. We were living in Calgary, and just that call to go home was significant. And so I did move home, moved within my traditional territory, the northern part, an area that I had never really gotten to know. But over the past 3 years, I do feel part of this community. I have come to learn and appreciate all the Dene people that make up the north. And through that, I have gone through those sacrifices, I guess you could say, and opportunities. But I just know that it's so important for us to try. And if it's not possible within your own life for practical reasons or otherwise to live within your traditional territory, finding a way to connect that's meaningful to you. And there are many ways to participate, especially around stewardship initiatives. That's something that all are connected to, and you don't need to live in a specific place to be a part of it. And it's a call to action really for all of us. I know within the work that we do around our IPCA, this isn't just for us. This is for everyone, for visitors to these lands, for the allies and the stakeholders that have careers and jobs within those areas. So it's just knowing that we're all have a responsibility, like so many of us have said. So, oh, Celeste, your hand. Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. I just wanted to just chime in because what you're saying is so right. You know, we need to, again, get reserves, take that line off. We need to all be together, you know, especially as Indigenous people, as Indigenous women, because we have, a threat that we may not survive if we do not, right? It's that serious, folks. And I think a lot of people are realizing that now. So we need to pull ourselves together. And we need to stop thinking about the ways that, things that stop us, right? And separate us, and start thinking about the things that unite us, right? Together. And that's not just Indigenous people, but it's all people, right? All of us. And we have a lot to teach. And that's why I want to give thanks for something like this, because it's how we have these, roundtables and things that we all learn from each other. Right, and connect and take strength. So I just wanted to jump in and say that.
Beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it's a great question. Please keep those questions coming. And, to kind of follow through with that thread, about why women are so important to this work. There are so many opportunities and challenges in the work that we do. And I think we all have examples of what that looks like and feels like. But there's also some really critical elements to what we're doing, in our work, whether it be through these Indigenous-led conservation initiatives that we're a part of, our land-based learning, our guardian programs. Just wanted to call out to us if there's something that you can think of where there's really just this need for us to be focusing women into this work and have a very real discussion about the challenges that do exist, but also those opportunities. And if there's something that you can call to mind that really speaks to that sentiment.
I could go first. Yeah, I think that I'm seeing really nothing but opportunities. I feel like there's so much demand for this type of work right now, that this type of person who is, like I'm listening to Celeste, is just like, just go and do it. And then you learn all these things, and then you build something, and then everyone else is like, oh, wow, like you've done this. And so there's an appetite and a hunger in a lot of settler society, just saying, we want to do better. We don't know how. We're really like nervous about how to work with Indigenous people or how to respect and uphold Indigenous laws. And so I think there's just nothing but opportunities. And as women, we are great at multitasking stereotypically, and we're great at doing a lot of things and juggling and managing households. And so it's hard to say no. It's always the hardest thing to say no, right? And to choose what you want to focus on, choose the partners and the people that you want to work with to make the most impact, I think is the biggest challenge I'm facing right now. Is there's just nothing but opportunity. And I'm really grateful for that. I think the other thing is that when we're able to work together and to not be afraid to make mistakes, right? So the diversity of approaches is something I'm really thinking a lot about lately with all of our nations across Turtle Island, and in BC especially, we have such diversity. And so there's no perfect model to how to be Indigenous or how to be a land steward, or there's no perfect thing that everybody should be following. We need to have diversity and be bold and take risks and not be afraid to fail. And when we do fail, it's okay, you know, like we just keep learning and keep going. But yeah, I love hearing about the different approaches. I love learning from everybody who I don't agree with and I do agree with, and not being in like an echo chamber where everybody's just on the same page and speaking perfectly, you know, and all the right terminology and everything. So yeah, I think that's my answer on that one.
I guess I'll go real quick. Yeah. I totally agree. Diversity, I mean, biodiversity is the definition of like Indigenous science, right? Really, that's kind of when I teach us, we go over that, right? So I think diversity in everything that we do also is the key, right? Because in my teachings, there is no right answer. There's no right or wrong answer. It is all answers that contribute, right? And so there is no definition, right? Because that's, again, Western thinking, right? There is black and white, and that's how it is. There is a right answer and a wrong answer. Well, with us, you could ask an elder 3 times a question and you're going to get 3 answers and they're all right. Linda, probably, eh? You know that. And then folks are confused. I'll be like, I don't know which one to choose. Well, it's all of them. It's all of it, right? And that's the point. Right. So I love that you said that, Tara, like, because that is how we do all, like, we all come with our different knowledge and our different, you know, ways in all of our experiences. And like I always say, like, it's like coming and making a puzzle. We all have like a piece. I think Marie Baptiste used to say this always, right? Like, you know, we all have pieces of the puzzle and we kind of all hold them. We don't have to hold all the knowledge, right? But our piece is important, right? And I say too a lot when I'm teaching, like, it must suck, you know, in like Western science to feel that you need to know everything, right? You know, because it's impossible. But if we all bring our little like pieces and we all put those pieces on the table, then we can figure out, right? Figure it out. So yeah, that's kind of what I have to say about that too. Similar. So just let's all work together and put our pieces on the table. But that's the key. We have to be willing to do that, right?
So I'll go back to my old teachings: 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth. You know, and I think that's been good for me to learn and to practice. You learn as you listen, you learn. Being an active listener, you learn. You're open, you know, and like Tara and Celeste, you know, have said before me, these things can't happen without collaboration. These ideas can't happen. Our ideas don't happen. That's what I'm going to say. Our ideas don't happen without collaboration. Don't want to use the word can't, because you can. So always wanting to collaborate and work together to make it better for everybody, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, male and female, or whatever you do in between, right? And I don't mean that in a flip way. I just, you know, there again, it's that Lakota in all my relations, we all benefit from it. And I think that's, you know, and you see it here. We're all sharing, we're all from different nations, we all have very different teachings, but we're all learning and supporting and uplifting, but also strengthening our point, because our point, when we get down to it, is all the same. So, merci.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, we're all in this together, and some elders that I've come to know in years past like to remind us that we as citizens of this earth are all Indigenous to somewhere. We all have a right and a role to play, and we can support each other's in ways that we're not necessarily doing right now, but it can be done, and it is being done, and that's what's so beautiful about it. And you know, I think of in our communities as well, it's about finding a safe space to experience and come to learn and know our nation's history. And it's so interesting to me in looking at the stats that are out there around land guardian programs across the country that a lot of them are women. I don't know the exact stats, but it's well over half, I believe. And that says something to me that that's a place that they feel that they need to be. And it will probably see it continue on. I know, and within our communities, most of the land guardians, again, are women out there on the land doing the work. Our lands and resource people are women. I remember sitting in a 3 Nations meeting where I was working with our neighboring nations, the Taku River Tlingit and the Tahltan Nation. And I was there as the Kaska rep and the Tahltan rep and the Taku River Tlingit rep. We were all women, and we're all there in that meeting, standing there for wildlife in the north. And it just kind of looked across the table, and to see that was incredible. And I'm not naive in knowing that it didn't always be that way. So I celebrate the fact that it is that way now, and that it will continually be that way. Is that we can all be represented within our fight for what we believe in. So I think it really transitions well into one of maybe the last questions we'll have the opportunity to talk about today. But I think it's a really, really important question that has come from this virtual campfire series of how can all of us, whether we're Indigenous or non-Indigenous, help support the work that's being done in conservation. Women, men, all of us here together, what can we do to support one another? I'll open it up there. I think so many of us have excellent ideas. While we're all sharing, maybe I'll get Christy or Victoria to also attach how to be an ally of Indigenous-led conservation that comes from the ILI website, because that's an excellent list, beginner's list of where to start. Cool.
Oh, you're on mute, Sharon.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of mumbling to myself.
Oh, okay,
You
sorry.
want to go first, Tara?
No, you can go if you want. I can go, it doesn't matter.
I'll let you go.
Okay. So I think one of the biggest requests or please do this that I have is to amplify our voices. And so, you know, I look at a lot of stats. I'm a bit of a data nerd, and I'm always reminded we're 4 to 6% of the population. And so no matter how many of these webinars and presentations and our communication strategy might be the most amazing thing ever, but we're not going to reach everybody. And so settlers or non-Indigenous folks, you know, you're in different circles that we're not maybe in, and you can amplify our voices. And you're also going to be, you know, privy to some, you know, not so great language about who we are and what we're trying to do. And you can challenge people and challenge norms. You know, I think that's the biggest thing, being like fair-skinned, as well as I've been in some rooms where people didn't know that I was Indigenous, and I've heard some terrible things. And if nobody corrects it, it just carries on. It becomes a norm. It becomes, you know, just a common held belief. And so it's the voice, it's the recognition of what we're doing, and carrying that in any circle that you're in, I think is one of the biggest gifts that you could give.
Yeah, I think I'll echo exactly what Tara said. I have been in that person in the room where people don't know who I am. I usually always wear beaded jewelry in that, and but I have been, and it's almost comical in a lot of ways when you speak up. And then they'll say, well, why are you speaking up? You know, doesn't affect you. Even if you're not Indigenous, it still affects you, because, you know, we're all part, you know, there's this great elder, he was the first Indigenous person I ever saw on TV. And that was Chief Dan George. He used to be on this show called The Beachcombers. And that for me, you know, CBC Northern Alberta, that was, you know, that was everything. But my mom was a big fan of his as well too. And one of his quotes, you know, that I have always kind of lived or taught is like, you know, we're all part of one race, the human race. we all share this land. We all share the water, some of us hunt, some of us don't, some of us hunted Safeway, but that's okay. We all have a responsibility to where we're living and the land that we're on. Whether that's, doing little things in your yard, no mow May for the bees. So the bees have a chance, planting some pollinator stuff in your flower bed, going and listening to conversations like this. And then, like Tara says, when you are in that room, remember that we're all standing there with you and be that voice for us. Because we're all standing there with you when somebody calls us down. Right? We're all there and we need that support and we need that help, because I know that I have stood up for other women of other races when they're called down. I have done that and I will continue to do that, because I don't think anybody should be called out. So I would hope and I would really pray that others that are out there know that we would do the same, or that they would do the same for us as we would do for them. It's that part of that golden rule, right? You treat others as you want to be treated. So I really think that, just being able to be that voice and having that strength within you to be our ally will be yours as well too. Mercy.
All right, I have some pretty strong thoughts on this, and they all, it's called land back, and land back isn't as scary as some people think. Sometimes it's a wonderful, beautiful relationship that is built between communities or between people or between, and it's about sharing, right? And Indigenous economies, as we know, have been destroyed by colonization, right? So we need economic reconciliation, not just hearts and flowers and wow, that really sucks, and all of this stuff, but we are really disadvantaged when it comes to economics. So we're trying to do all this good work. We're trying to build all of this stuff. We're trying to help climate change, but we're not coming from the same economic opportunities that many are, because our land was taken from us, right? So that's why we do the land acknowledgements and things like that, is to acknowledge, like Toronto is on my traditional territory, right? And I was never paid for any of that land. My family doesn't have intergenerational wealth because of it, right? So these are big issues. But like I said, right now I'm in a partnership. I'm sharing 47 acres of land with a settler couple that wanted it to be conserved and used in Indigenous ways. So these are things that can be done, right? And we can have these. So if you have land, right, then think about giving it back, whichever way it goes back, whether it's to a nation if you're by a reserve, or whether it's through personal relationships or whatever that, because we talk about the land and we talk about getting back to the land and we talk about all of this stuff, but where is the land? Where is that land, right? Even like and this is around the world, but Indigenous people have been displaced, right? And it's that's a really good one. The Yellowhead Institute has some amazing stuff on there for folks. Yeah, I can't say it enough that we need to start actually sharing the land, and allowing people on your land is not the same as actually giving the land back, right? And there needs to be ceremony around that and other things like that happens, but we need to really think about this seriously, this what land back actually means, and stop being so scared of it, because it actually is a beautiful thing. Because I think we all want, the earth to be preserved, and we are doing it as Indigenous people, right? Globally, we are holding most of the biodiversity on earth, right? In our reserves and in our areas around the world. So just, think about that.
100%. Such great advice, ladies. Couldn't agree more. And the thing that pops up in my head is just this reverence to continue to learn, as someone who's trying to do more of the educational thing. I've noticed it in the classes I've taught about the history of our people and our lands, and that there is that need to continually be a lifelong learner and understanding the history, but also what's happening today. And I think I could be wrong in this, but I think a lot of the people who are on this this Zoom with us here today come from maybe an environmental background or might work for an environmental NGO, for example. And you'll see that there's been a really big shift occurring, especially around representation and sharing the space with Indigenous nations around conservation and stewardship initiatives. And we've always been doing it. It hasn't just started. It's just the support for it has started. And that's why you're seeing this increased representation on this global stage. It's always been there. The elders in my community have always been fighting for the land and what we believe, but now we're starting to see that support, and hopefully we'll continue to always see that support. But you know, support can look so many different ways, and the thing that stands out for me in this whole how to be an ally or how to support or how to be part of the conversation is trust. Trust that we know what is good for the land, and you do too, and we can do it together, and that if through that, there will be those respectful partnerships so that groups can work within our communities to really carry out the vision, because the vision is rooted in our ancestors' beliefs, and everyone can come to appreciate that. And the sooner we can come together to respect our knowledge and our science and our understanding of what is good for the land is good for the people, we're going to be better off, and we're going to illuminate everyone's worldview in that approach. So yeah, that's great. That's, I see a few more questions that might have popped up. I'm not sure if we had time for that, because I do want to give some space for us to close out in a good way, but I want to open it up to you, Sharon and Celeste and Tara, if you have any final thoughts that you might want to share with people before we end our time together today.
Yeah, I did want to speak to the question about racism, social justice, and conservation. I think we're just like Celeste really hammered it home for us, and we live in all different types of territories. Some are completely overrun with settlement and there's just no place to live as Indigenous people, and then others have much more access to our territory, and we all need to kind of be mindful of that. And I think that when she was talking, I just thought, you know, I just taught a course about UNDRIP and talked about terra nullius and how hurtful and painful terra nullius is. It's literally erasing us from our place that we belong. It's saying that we're not human, that we don't exist, and that is the foundation of racism in Canada and in other colonized countries as well. And that is something we still see on a daily basis. Every time I go to Vancouver, I think, oh my gosh, like I feel bad coming here. Like this is the Musqueam land, and it's just overrun like with people. And here I am on my holiday or whatever it is, you know. But just not doing that, just being mindful of it. And then how do I action that feeling of I don't just want to feel bad. I actually want to do something about this. And then what is that action that I can do? So I think that's the biggest piece around racism for me, is that the erasing of us as people from our lands and erasing us as humans, really. And that's what conservation is all about, is bringing us back to that place where we belong and to our rightful role in our territories.
I'll go right now. Yeah. I just want to jump on that exactly, is that, you know, the elephant in the room, right? Which is the racist, genocidal processes of, you know, conservation and about colonial states, right? What happened was folks came here and didn't see us, right? Didn't see how we had changed the landscape. Every single piece of grass was touched by us. There is no such thing as a pristine myth. That's why it's called, or pristine land or wilderness. That's why it is a pristine myth, right? We had touched everything. And, you know, others came and they saw this and they thought, wow, you're just not using this. Look at all the berries. Look at all the fruits. Look at all the, you know, the wonderful nut trees. Look at all this. Well, that was put there by us, right? It was here. We lived this way for 10,000 plus years, right? And so that recognition, that respect, exactly like you were saying, Gillian, that respect needs to come back. And it needs to come back, not just again in Hearts and Flowers, but it needs to come back in recognizing, which is why this conservation through reconciliation is so good. This partnership, talking, let's take off the band-aid. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Like, this is a very racist thing that happened. Conservation, Western conservation is, you know, is colonial, right? And so let's change that. Right? Let's change it. And that's what this is about, right? This is exactly Grandmother Kim. Yeah, we're doing it. We're changing it. That's why we're here. And so I just need to, you know, that you are part of the solution if you are here today, right? Because you're doesn't matter where on that journey you are, but you have power. And I just wanted to say that, like, everyone has power, and you have power to change things, whether it's through policy work, amplifying us, if you have means, you know, economic reconciliation, it all works. Like I said, everyone has a piece. Together we make a whole.
So something that somebody that is a leader in my world always reminds me of, or us of, is that the UNDRIP itself is a very male-centric document that was written over 40 years ago or so. So we have to worm our way through that as women as well, to ensure that we're recognized in that document. It's a great document. You know, I know that they use that document for Métis to get recognition. It was one of the main things that they used, according to my mother. She was part of those negotiations. But I agree with I agree with everything that that my colleagues are saying here today. You know, racism is alive and well. It's something that we deal with every day, but it's something that we can also overcome and make it so it's more equitable. I'm not about equality so much. Equality is great, but there's got to be equity within equality. I don't need as much pie as, you know, my neighbor. So I'm going to give my neighbor a bigger piece of pie so that we have equity, so we're equitable together. And that's how I kind of look at things. I don't think that we can do anything alone. Power comes in voices, you know, and we still hear the whole thing about women's lip, you know, and as long as those lips are moving and saying good things, then that's where we need to be. So let's take that and kind of move it in that way. But thank you so much to Celeste and Tara.
Thank you to all three of you for everything. And you'll see the sentiment in the chat of everything that has been said here today. And we're so grateful to the partner organizations for putting on this series for us to take part of, and for us to share our stories and compare our journeys and understand our visions for the land. So thank you so much, Sukasinla, Masi Cho. I definitely will encourage you to also keep a lookout for the last part of this series that will be coming sometime this winter, which will, I think, help complete that lifestyle cycle of this important topic about Indigenous women's stewardship and advocacy. So thank you, Celeste, Sharon, Tara, for everything that you've done to share with us your knowledge and experience. And I'd like to invite Elder Linda back in, and thank you for taking part and listening. I was looking at you, seeing the head nods, seeing the heart feelings. So thank you for that, and offer you the opportunity to help close out this dialogue for us in a good way today. Kula.
I always forget that little button that makes you heard. It always reminds me that, like, I'm 75 years old, and throughout my lifetime, I always felt unheard. Women were not heard. And when we started finding our voice, like Sharon reminded me, women's lip, she called it, but there used to be women's lib. And I couldn't understand what that whole concept was about. Burn your bra, do this, do that. I'm thinking, heck, I'm lucky I can even afford a bra. I was raising 4 kids on my own. And I was just like, oh my, But as I grew in life, I found that our words are the most important thing. We need to share whatever little we have in our language, our songs, our dances, our stories of our family, whatever they were. Like my family, I'm 7th generation Métis, Cree, and French. And if you get right down to it, I have Iroquois and Irish and all kinds. I have many, many stories to tell. And my last project, I figure I'm in the last quadrant of my life. I have a friend who's 86 and we're making Indigi babies. They're little baby dolls in a moss bag. And I'm giving them to my great-grandchildren and my great nieces and nephews who are my great-grandchildren according to Wakotewin. And they're little brown babies. And they're gonna ask their parents one day, why did Kokum give me a brown baby? And the parent has an obligation to share their indigeneity because many of our children aren't exposed to that, especially these little ones. So that's my last project. I'm always up to no good and doing good. And it's also a part of conservation because I save these little pieces of hide, and then you can cut them really thin if you have good scissors, and you reshape them on a wood, a back of a chair, whatever, and you can make laces. You can use them for hair ties or whatever. I use them for the Indigi babies to tie the moss bag, the lacing on the moss bag. And nothing goes to waste. All the little dresses and bonnets are made out of little scraps of material that people have made ribbon skirts and ribbon shirts and whatever. And those are the kinds of things that we can use as a teaching to these children, my grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and most of them aren't biological because I have a tribe of Klingons, kids that needed somebody to love, and they cling on and they like Velcro and they don't leave. And then they bring their children and grandchildren. So I'm going to close with a prayer. I thought of singing the Sky Woman song because she's the one that leads us through everything we do. You know, we always think we're the boss of our own self. We have many bosses. And Sky Woman was the original woman who brought us, like I think it was Celeste that talked about the seeds and the plants. And she brought all things to Mother Earth. And there's a song that honors her. And I don't know, you're the boss, Gillian. So if
Please do share.
If you think it's okay, because that's another way we learn is by, when I sing, I always ask people, just close your eyes and let it resonate. Let it vibrate all the negative and the ugliness that we pick up in our day. Let it vibrate it all back into place so that we shine with that sunset glow when the sun is at her most beautiful as it goes to sleep. And it shows us all the colors of the earth. And it shows us that we can be at peace if we choose to. And I always use a turtle rattle because I'm a turtle grandmother. The turtle is my teacher. And there's many, many kinds of turtles. And as the older you get, the slower you move, so you get more like the turtle. But I will sing that song because I think it's important that we acknowledge who we walk, the footprints that we walk in. So I'll sing a song for you, and then I'll say a short prayer. Are we running out of time?
Those who will stay will stay. So however long it takes, Linda, thank you so much.
Okay. Oh, Gizzy go square. Oh, Gizzy go square. Oh, Gizzy go square. Yo, hey. hey, hey, oh, geese go squirrel, oh, geese go squirrel, oh, geese go squirrel, hey, oh, yeah, hey, 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 oh. That's to call her for blessings for each of us and all the people that we work with and provide information to. Ojawish cookies, Kubanese them. Creator, grandmothers and grandfathers, I thank you for this wonderful sharing of ideas and ways to work together to make the world a better place for all of us, our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren. I ask that you bless us as we walk through this day and keep us in good health and strong minds and bodies so that we can continue to do your work here on earth. For all the things that we ask and that we give thanks for, we need you to know that we're so grateful that we walk with you. Hi, Kinenaskumtan. Have a good day.
Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day, everyone, wherever you are, at home or visiting, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.